Hey, everybody. I started playing over again. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Pianist Academy. I'm Charles Szczepanek. It's been a while since we've done one of these. A month. Welcome, Bethany and OCD King and C Drive. Good day, C Drive. Welcome, Antonio and Rob Harrington. Welcome, Dave and Nancy. Oh, it's so great to see everybody. And Frederick. Thank you so much, Frederick. It's my one time a year to wear this. Really, like the month of December is the only time I can get by with this sweater. So, and Sir Wolseley. Oh well, it's too bad you can't stick with us, Sir Wolseley. But thanks for saying hi. It's good. Always great to hear from you, Sir Wolseley, and we'll look forward to hearing you play again next year, hopefully. Yeah, Nathaniel, welcome. Bedlington Groomer, welcome. Just a quick note before we jump into this open session today, and that is that if you were here last time, we had some issues with the stream. Catherine, welcome, and Becky, welcome. We had some issues with the stream where things were buffering, and it was not good for like 10 minutes. So I'm trying something completely different. It might look different, it might sound different. Let me know if there's a problem, and I'll see what I can do. But yeah, hopefully you couldn't even tell the difference, and it's just on my end. So great. All right, Bedlington Groomer, awesome. Sounds good. Well, goodness gracious. Today's a completely open session. I don't have anything pre-planned to talk about. We don't have any submissions. There was a chance that Miguel was going to send in his performance of the first Ballade by Chopin. Alas, he didn't get to it. He said he's going to send it in for the stream in January. Great. Thanks, Nathaniel, and thanks, Antonio. Appreciate it. Also, hey, well, a couple of you that are chiming in that I'm responding to, let me know how long it takes for me to actually respond to you, because I'm trying to do it as soon as I see it on my screen. But if you just let me know that, then I have a good idea of like if there's 10 seconds or how long that delay is. In any case, happy holidays to everybody. I hope your holiday season is off to a good start. Not too crazy, staying sane, right? Of course, continuing to practice hard. Does anybody have performances coming up for the holidays? Hannah, welcome, Hannah. Well, that's wonderful, Antonio. Thanks. And Bedlington Groomer, awesome. Yeah, is anybody playing anything? Do you have any holiday recitals coming up? Those are huge this time of year. Whether you're playing holiday rep or not, there's almost always piano recitals happening in the month of December. Bethany, you say both your choir programs are this week. Are you accompanying? Are you singing? Are you doing both? Are you directing? Let us know, Bethany. Choral accompanying, I think, it's great fun. I used to do that a ton. Oh, very cool, Bethany, accompanying one and directing another. Very nice. Anybody else? Are you just having fun practicing? Frederick says lots of choir stuff. Looking forward to not having to follow a conductor. I have a choral conducting, following a conductor story that I'm going to share. I'm not going to name any names. But Whitney, hello, Whitney. Gosh, I was working with a very, very fine professional group, and the director of the group had been working with the singers for like 15 years, 20 years, and he had a very interesting conducting style where, and I see this sometimes in orchestra too, where the ictus, which is the bottom of the beat, was shown, and after it happened, everybody responded. Like a very obvious delay from where the beat looked like it happened and where the ensemble felt it happen. Bethany, Frederick, have you experienced this? That's not the way I conduct. I like the beat to happen physically in space where you expect it to. And it was like guessing, because I only got one rehearsal with the group before we played a whole weekend of concerts. And it was like guessing where the beat was going to be, which was especially hard to follow during like retards and rubato and whatnot. So that's my interesting story. I had like one chance to follow the conductor, do my best at trying to play a percussion instrument when the beat looked like it was here, but it really happened somewhere else in the gesture. I think maybe it's a pianist thing because we are so used to having contact with something on the beat. And so I don't know. Bethany, have you had anything like that? And Frederick, yeah, that's the way to do it. Oh, Bethany, you said one of your soloists could have used a conductor. And Antonio, you have big news. You say you have free access to a Steinway D at your local arts center. Well, it's not wasted on you. You can definitely enjoy it. Gosh, I don't have access to a Steinway D almost ever. Enjoy the opportunity while you have it, Antonio. And yeah, experience what it's like when you play some of those really low pitches and you can feel the whole instrument resonating. That's really cool, especially because I know you're coming from a keyboard to digital too. That'll be a very different experience. Antonio, have you gotten to go and play it yet, or is this coming up this month? Well, this is lovely catch-up time. Since Frederick is here, there's a whole lot of content that Frederick and I have worked on that's going to be coming out on the channel very soon, at least by Friday. And you'll just have to wait and see what that's going to be about. But there are 5 long videos, one of which is about 20 minutes long, 4 others that are short, and then 2 shorts as well. Frederick, I don't even know if you knew all of that. Yeah, and you knew probably most of that. But stay tuned for all of that. It's all going to drop probably within a handful of days because it's all related to one another. So I'm not going to spread it out. It's just going to come sometime either by the end of this week or no later than early next week. Great. Yeah, mystery and intrigue, Bethany. Well, that was a fun time catching up. Does anybody have questions? What would you like to talk about today? Even if you don't have any questions, this is an open session. We'll see if anybody has anything to say. This is great because I get to continue to sip my coffee. Nathaniel asks for tips on some Bach. Lots of hand movements. You're not looking at the keys. You say try to read a couple beats ahead, focusing on a couple bars at a time. Let's see if we can kick something off with that. And Bethany, let's see. Do you like arranging or composing more? Which do you find more difficult? Oh shoot! Is it Leisha? Leisha? I can't. It always confuses me when I see your name, and I'm sorry. I think it's Leisha. You say, tell us about the live chats that you do on Patreon. That one is especially easy to answer. So we'll actually start with that. I don't do any on Patreon. This is the only place that I do live streams, right here on YouTube, usually twice a month. I do have a Patreon page, and that page is fully devoted to my arranging, composing work, and a little bit of my performance, but it's mostly my arranging, composing. So I don't even think there's a link to that in the description of this video. A couple people via Pianist Academy had signed up for it thinking that it was a education-related page, and it's not really. But if you do support my work on Patreon, you can sign up for tiers like to get free MP3 downloads or audio downloads, free copies of the arrangements that I write, free sheet music. I just posted one on there last week, and it's not coming out officially until this Friday. So stuff like that happens on Patreon. And Frederick has a question. just chat about performance anxiety. Yeah, we can go into all of that stuff. I'm going to try. So, yeah, absolutely, Leisha. Oh, it's the wrong one. Let's see. I'm going to try to touch on, we'll go in order like we always do. Nathaniel first. And Bethany and Frederick's question. Those two are going to go together. And yeah, you'll find out why in a minute. So, Nathaniel, I just need to pull up the sheet music for that Bach. So give me a second to do that. I'm just taking the first one I can find, so it might not be the most amazing edition. Oh, oh shoot, I think I might have downloaded the wrong one. You say number 934, Nathaniel. Do you know which number or what key? And Catherine, that's a great question. Catherine's question is about choosing pieces, especially like at an intermediate level, and maybe how to choose pieces to continue learning. Great questions. Really, yeah, wonderful. Let's give Nathaniel a chance to write back. Very nice, Catherine. Okay, so it is C minor. Okay, great. That's the one that I pulled up. Okay. Let's see. Let me go back to your question. Learning tips. So, here's the piece. This is going to be a complete sight read for me. So, bear with me for a second. Okay. That's the A section, we'll say, yeah? Nathaniel, what tempo are you working at it right now? First question, what tempo? And how long have you been practicing it? So I kind of have an idea of how close are we to sight reading this for the first time versus have we been working on it for a few weeks or a month or something like that? Okay, you say 2 weeks. Great. And 85 per eighth note. Oh, Dith. Welcome, Dith. If it makes you feel any better, if I couldn't sight read that, I shouldn't be teaching. So let's see, 85. Okay. Per eighth note. Nathaniel, have you done any looking at how much looking have you done at shapes, chord shapes, harmonies, and reading? Let's call it reading, organizing horizontal musical information, but reorganizing it in a vertical way. What I mean by that for everybody, many of my private students will know this. I have a couple of them here. That's why I say that. For example, if we look at the first bar and we just look at that shape over the first 2 beats of the first bar, little chord analysis. So Nathaniel, that'll help. Chord analysis, great. But if you were to, anybody actually answer this, if we were to look at just those first 2 beats that I've circled, what does it make? How can we sum up what happens in those 2 beats? First, as quickly as possible, what is it? And then, oh, no problem, Catherine. Hopefully you can tune back in. So first, what is it as quickly as possible? Secondly, how much further can we define what it is? How much more detail can we give? Great, Nathaniel, C minor. Wonderful. Now, let's be more specific. How else can we define that C minor? Bethany, second inversion. Dith, you say C minor chord with a D passing tone. That's okay, great. We're going to come back to Bethany's in a second. But Dith, what you said is also really important, because if we can recognize that that note in red is not a part of the chord, but like Dith said, it is a passing tone. Great. That's important too. But Bethany's comment is the best way to look at this. So this is a C minor chord in second inversion. Do you know, Nathaniel, for example, do you know your C minor inversions? Root position, first inversion, second inversion. Can you play those? Maybe not that fast, but can you navigate in blocked chords around like this? Can you do it broken? Maybe just triads, not without octaves. Or if you link them together, and we could go all the way to the top and back down. This would be a great exercise. Pair that kind of stuff as you work on your scales. Go through this, all of the inversions of a chord, broken. And this is less about, Nathaniel said, you can, but not by heart. We want to change that so that this is automatic, so that when you think about C minor, we can play C minor. And our vocabulary is going to start with these closed position chords. And over time, with more and more practice, it's going to expand into chords like that. And C minor 7, C minor 7 at 9. And we could continue to go from there, right? Or it could expand into really arpeggiated stuff. To me, to you, it sounds like a lot of notes. To me, it's just C minor, right? Let's go back to the score. So what we want to be able to do is see that. Okay, there we go. Hopefully my iPad doesn't turn off. We want to be able to see what I circled on the page as a particular, not just a particular harmony, but a chord and a position on the keyboard that we're really used to. So if you know your C minor inversions, when we begin this piece, those 4 pitches become just C minor in second inversion, and we know exactly what it feels like. And then I can read those 4, and I just am reading, are we ascending through the inversion, or are we descending through the inversion? So I'm not reading every pitch anymore. That is one thing that I really wanted to point out, was doing that kind of reading. In Bach, it's going to be very challenging because harmony is changing all the time. In this piece, it's not quite as bad. Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm going to talk through these just for a couple measures. Let's say 4 measures. I'll talk through them, but I won't write them all down. But this is how I'm thinking. C minor, it's right hand second inversion. Next beat, G7, which is our dominant. Next beat, A flat major. And then a major 7. Okay. The other thing I'm seeing is that it not only looks like A flat major and feels like A flat, but the seventh, the C, also makes this kind of feel like a C minor over A flat. So, seeing both of those relationships. Next, F minor 7. This is a F half diminished, or full diminished triad. We'll continue. Now, I guess it's truly, if we look at the end of the bar, D half diminished 7. But I'm not actually reading it like that. I'm reading here interval of a seventh at the beginning of bar 3. Now a diminished triad, and then a leap of a sixth. Next bar, G7. Okay, so I'm going through all of that to show you that I am definitely, the last thing I'm doing is thinking C, D, E flat, G, D, F in that first bar. I'm thinking C minor, G7. Yeah. Yeah, Nathaniel, Nathaniel, have you had a chance to watch my video on transposing Clementi? If you haven't, that's almost exactly the skills that I talk about in that video, which is like 20 minutes long, are almost exactly what I'm doing in this piece. I'm not doing a chordal analysis. Like, it's not Roman numeral analysis. I'm not telling you how the chord is functioning. We don't need to know that to be good sight readers or to become good sight readers, or just to be able to process all of those notes a little bit more quickly. We just need to come up with new digestible chunks of information. Think about it this way. Every individual pitch, right? Well, they have letters. They're like learning the letters in the alphabet. When we create chords out of those letters, like a root position, C minor chord, for example, might be a simple word, like a 2-letter or 3-letter word. And we learn those fairly early on as we learn language, right? Maybe when we learn second inversion of this, it's like a synonym of the word for C minor. If we're just interchanging language, spoken language, and musical language, right? So it's a different word that has a similar meaning, but slightly different. Yeah. And we're looking for how can we start to build those chunks into how we look at music. So that's what we just did. Can we see C minor, G7? Also, maybe that's a little bit too hard. Let's go back a little bit. Can we see that this is stepwise up a scale, and it's just up C minor? Can you play C minor scale with more finger combinations than just how we'd practice it, with 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But can you play this starting on the second finger? Can you play it starting on the third finger? The crosses of the thumb are going to feel a little awkward and different. And okay, we don't want to practice scales like that for a very long time because we want our standard scale pattern to be the most ingrained. But starting on different pitches will also open us up to the idea that we can use any set of fingers or any combination of fingers in the middle of the scale. Could you see that those first 3 notes are a scale? Then the next 2 pitches are a sixth, in particular a minor sixth, but they're a sixth that follow the diatonic scale. Next 2 pitches are also minor sixth. Nope, they're a major sixth. They sound like a minor sixth. So can we read those intervals also? Yeah. So that's a little bit more simple approach than analyzing the harmony or coming up with chords. But scale, interval jump, scale, and then going through a triad that we're very familiar with, C minor. Okay, that's point 1, Nathaniel. Okay, the other thing in your original comment, you said that you're focusing on a couple bars and you play them very slowly. Great. Add to that, while you focus on a couple bars, how quickly can you memorize one bar? Can you make a plan to memorize that one bar within 5 minutes of practice, let's say, especially if you're 2 weeks in? Bar one, have it memorized very quickly. So can you look away from the score? If you're using an iPad, can you turn the score off? Can we look away from the keys? Let's not start with that. Let's start by looking down at our hands. After the first time you test yourself playing something from memory, can we look down and play that bar without looking at the score? When that feels comfortable, can you look away from both your hands and the score and play that bar? When that feels comfortable, add the next bar. And then how quickly can that be memorized? I know you're going, let's see, there's 85. At that tempo that's very slow, we don't want to be working on a very large amount of music. Our mind has a limited capacity, let's say, when we're trying to store things in short-term memory, which is really, that's how we learn, right? We take information that we're seeing that we're not familiar with. We store that information, oral information, the notation, maybe some harmony, and the physical movement of it, and it gets put in short-term memory. Hopefully relatively soon. The trouble is, if you try to play, and Nathaniel, you might not be doing this, you said you're taking small chunks, but make sure they're really small enough, like one measure. Because even if you take 2 measures at this tempo, unless you're very familiar with harmony and other methods of remembering what you did in the first beat of the first bar, actually a long time has elapsed. And our mind is not going to very well remember beat one of bar one. So while we're taking those really low tempos, make the chunks very short. Nathaniel, are you doing 1 bar chunks, or are you taking maybe more music, 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars at a time? Yes, Nathaniel, just saying, maybe you're playing too many bars. Yeah. Possible. Likely. A lot of students I've worked with underestimate. Underestimate? I think that's the right way I want to say it. How short a practice chunk can actually be. And the more and more advanced you get, the bigger those chunks can get, especially at slower tempo. We're used to seeing certain information. We have better ideas of how to categorize a lot of it into one thing in our mind. So the better you get at that, the longer those slow practice chunks can become. But if we're nearer the beginning, they have to be very, very small. So Nathaniel, those are my 2 tips for you for learning this. 1, yes, some chord analysis, some interval analysis, or intervals versus scales, and how familiar are we with those? Secondly, watch my video on Clementi and transposition. The video is called, I think, the biggest skill left out of classical piano lessons. And thirdly, very, very small chunks in your practice, especially at the slow tempo. Take 1 bar. You could even break it down further than that and say, I'm going to play whatever fits into this 1 hand position or 1 harmony, like C minor, that'll become a chunk. The next beat, G7, becomes a chunk. Then maybe bar becomes 1 chunk, because it really falls firmly into just 1 shape, C minor. Does that all make sense? Kyle. Hello, Kyle. I'm really excited to hear that, Kyle. So Kyle just did a recording with a new virtual piano. And Kyle has mentioned to me before that he's experimenting with using it, a virtual instrument, and pairing it with live recordings of performers, and blending the two together. And Kyle, I bet it's gonna sound real nice. Oh, very cool. Okay, Nathaniel, I hope that helps you out. I know we only looked at, like 3 measures, but everything we talked about applies to the entire piece. All right. Let's go back. So, okay, next 2 questions I said we're going to get paired together, and that was Bethany's and Frederick's. Bethany's question is, do I like arranging or composing more, and which is more difficult? And then Frederick's was about performance anxiety. Oh, Nancy, very cool. Nancy has the sheet music for that prelude. Great stuff, Nancy. Okay, Bethany's question, do I like arranging or composing more? They're very different, usually. I guess I might lean into saying I like composing original music more, because even if I don't intend it when I set out for a project, I end up writing original snippets of music in all of my in a lot of my arrangements. Like Bethany, you had played on the channel here my arrangement of the theme from Mission Impossible, and sure, that's an arrangement of it's in C minor, I think. But the middle section, that little jazzy solo interlude, begins as a reference to the very original recording from the 60s. And I think it might be like an electronic harpsichord or electronic clavichord that begins a solo in the middle of the theme. But then my version takes that and expands on it into something totally different. And I've got to say, that's probably my favorite part of that arrangement to play, is my original writing that's right in the middle of it. And I do that, if you're familiar, like Becky was here, maybe still here. If you're familiar with a lot of my Christmas arrangements, I like to throw in original, like, introductions to Christmas hymns and original interludes between verses and stuff like that. I really love that. So I'm going to go with I like composing original music more, mainly for that reason. But it is not always easier. I think when I write those little snippets within arrangements, I'm usually inspired by something that I heard or played while I was playing the original piece. And if I'm writing something completely from scratch, sometimes those ideas are not as forthcoming. Or I need to either look somewhere to be inspired for something, or I need to do some improv and see where things go. Sometimes I'll have an idea that pops in my head, and I hear it first in my mind, and then I come to the piano and work out how I'd like to use it. I think that answers that question. And whether it's original music or arranging, actually, one of the things I find more difficult, especially in arranging, is keeping the textures smaller. It's very easy to write a lot of notes. It's not always easy to play them when it comes time for me to learn what I wrote and make a recording of it. That's not always easy. But in the process, if I'm listening to a recording, it's easy to say, oh, I hear all this stuff going on and I just want to jot it all down. And great. What's hard is taking the most important information out of that original piece and simplifying it to the point where I still convey what I'd like to. Maybe that should be a more simple version of whatever theme is currently I'm working on in that arrangement. Maybe it should be something that's more complex. But simplifying for the sake of the music, this was kind of a mindset that I started down the path of after I released my first album of arrangements from movie music. When I started that project, I thought, I'm going to write these really big arrangements and they're going to be flashy and virtuosic. And okay, that was fun. That was in 2016. Oh my gosh, that was 8 years ago. And now, starting actually the year after that, I set out a goal to say, I'm only going to use those virtuosic techniques when I feel like the music really needs it to say what it needs to say. And the rest of the time, I'm going to look for other solutions to the writing problem. Like, how am I going to score it? And I'm still walking that road. Hey, Rhodesy, welcome. Yeah, Bethany, you say you have the opposite problem where things aren't full enough and you have to add stuff. Yeah. Bethany, I guess maybe the more like list transcriptions you play, the less that'll be a problem. But don't go too far. But that can be a really fun way. And a lot of times when I teach arranging to students, we look at Liszt and Rachmaninoff, their styles of piano, especially Liszt's transcriptions of other pieces and how he created large and orchestral textures at the piano. So that can also be a great place to look if you want tips for, we don't have to reinvent anything, at least not while we're learning how to do more of this stuff. So look at some Liszt transcriptions, and there won't be any lack of, or there won't be few notes. There'll be very many. Oh, Rhodesy, I'm so sorry. Oh, Rhodesy said his Scooby was his dog. I'm sorry, Rhodesy. That's tough. Antonio, I see your question. I'm going to come back to that because it's time to tie this into Frederick's question. If you signed up for my email list, which you can now do in the description if you're not already, the description of the video has a little link to get signed up. I tell a very brief story, and it is greatly revolving around performance anxiety. And I may have shared it on the stream before, so apologies if you've heard it, but I think it's been 6 to 12 months since I talked about it, at least. I think all performers always have some kind of anxiety surrounding performing in front of others, even performing in front of our teachers. And that's something I'm sure many of you can relate to. I know many of my private students have that issue, and no matter how kind I am, there's always nervousness. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that for a lot of us, when we study something, we are trying to do the best that we can. And then we want to show someone else, someone that we care about or someone that we care how they think of us, or right, we want to show that person, that could be teacher, family, friends, audience for a performer. We want to show those people our best effort and all of the things that we've accomplished. And that thought in itself leads us down this road of getting in our head and being nervous and anxious about what we're playing, to the point where there are stories about Horowitz, for example, needing to be pushed out on stage by his manager because he really didn't want to be out there. And we think of him as he was a great pianist. He was phenomenal. And he loved playing. But there are stories of him, like his manager finding him in the restroom and needing to drag him out and push him out on stage. So everybody struggles with this. For me, it came to a head when I was in my second year of my master's degree, working up to my final recital, and I was playing, among other things, the Liszt B minor sonata. And 3 to 4 months before my final graduate recital, I had recorded my first album. And I was astounded, very happy, ecstatic that it was released on a record label. It was a local one in Phoenix. It was great. But I had recorded pieces that I had been working on and competed with, the Paul Laurent Sonata and a set of pieces by Liszt were on that first album. Shorter pieces by Liszt. Well, I did that recording in January. My final recital was March, April-ish of the same year. And I completely got in my own head about how perfect I needed to be in performance because of how perfect my album was. Long story short, I still made it through the performance. Looking back on it now, I learned a lot, but it was almost horrifying to be on stage, and it was like I had no muscle memory of what I was playing. I had so much anxiety around all of it that I had to work my way through really big pieces of music via other knowledge, like theory analysis, just remembering how things went. I had to fudge my way through a couple passages, trying to improvise my way through in order to get from point A to point B, because my memory, because I was so anxious and nervous, it was just nowhere to be found. And it hadn't mattered that I had put in all the time and more that I needed to perform it. It was so bad that I kind of vowed that I would never perform again at that program, or after that program. I just thought, I'm done. This is it. Can't do it anymore. This links to Bethany's story, because 2 years later, I wrote a new album at the encouragement of a friend of mine. I wrote a new album of originals and arrangements of music. It was my first time doing that. And I gave my first performance since that horrible event. And all of a sudden, everything started to open back up for me. So my dealing with performance anxiety first stemmed from learning to, or having opportunities to, express my music in concert in front of others. And then slowly that unfolded into more and more performances of classical music, more collaborative performances of classical music. And I was back to kind of doing what I had been doing before that event, and even more, a lot more. So that's the backstory. Yeah, Bethany, I feel for you. That's the backstory. Now, to go back into a little bit more detail about actually dealing with anxiety around performances, I'm a big fan of one, positive thinking, visualization of, I love doing this. And I've done it since that time. And when I have been, for example, like on tour, and I don't know the piano I'm going to play. I don't know where I'm going to be playing. I know I'm going to have like 20 minutes to try something out before I have to play a 90-minute program. So I'm not going to get to go over everything. I visualize performing all of my music away from the keyboard. That's a big way of dealing with that. I visualize performing it in front of a fake audience, an imaginary audience. And every time I do that, it's not quite as emotionally grounding as actually doing it, actually performing. A successful performance in public is one of the best things to help build confidence. But it's a very close replica of that. And in the process, I can also find out what my brain doesn't really know all that well yet, and I can practice it more before I get on stage. Also working through performing things for family, friends, one other person if you can before you have to perform, or multiple times if you can before you have to perform. Learn from those. Learn to accept the anxiousness that you feel. And don't think of it as a negative thing, that it's okay to feel those nerves because they come from a good place, tying this back to where we started. We feel anxious because we want to do well. And that's great. It's great to want to give that to whoever is listening, right? Um, let's see, any more about that? Breathing, like if you can learn breathing exercises or like centering breathing, centering meditation, that can also help. If the anxiety feels like it's kind of getting out of control, these all have nothing to do with, they have some to do with playing the piano, but relatively little to do with like how we actually spend our time practicing. There are some things that we can do, but they're not, it's different than dealing with the anxiety itself. So centering meditation and breathing exercises, if you become familiar with those and you use them in daily life anyway, those are great things then to use if you're sitting backstage waiting for something. Um, another quick story, and then we'll move on to the next question. um, Many years ago, I was performing on public radio in Chicago, and I want to say 9 prize winners in a competition. There was supposed to be 8, but 2 people tied. Anyway, 9 of us played live on the radio, and we went to a recording studio at the radio station and did everything. And the whole show was recorded like a live event, so there was no editing later on. So anyway, we showed up like with 1 or 2 family members. So there was a small in studio audience, and the performers were there, and the radio host was there. And the performers went in order of award. So the top winner played last on the program. Of course, that's always how it works. I wasn't the top winner, but I played somewhere in the middle of the program. And so I'm sitting there for 45 minutes listening to a person play, hearing their interview, watching them sit down. Next person gets up. We go through the process all over again. I can't leave. I can't go warm up. I can't do anything. I'm feeling very nervous. My dad was sitting next to me. He was with me. And he's told this story many times because I don't actually remember doing it, but I guess some part of it had become a habit. And he would say, things like, "Oh, you were like tapping your feet because you were so nervous," and all this other stuff, and finger fidgeting. And apparently during the interview of the person right before I was supposed to play, all of that went away. And he's like, "Your whole demeanor changed. You sat very still. Your breathing slowed down. All of the fidgeting stopped. And then you just got up and went to go play." And he thought it was like this magical thing that had happened. I didn't know it at the time, but I had been practicing doing that via practicing performing for other people in studio class, for family, at choir, all of those things. And so what I had practiced, the instinct of what I had practiced kicked in. So that's why we want those things to become a part of just who we are, if we can. And then a lot of that, how we deal with the anxiety around performance can start to, it'll never go away, but we can get it under control and we can help to harness that energy and put it into our playing instead. Great question, Fred. Okay, I got to catch up on some comments from the chat, and then I'm going to dive in and see if I can find the next question that we had. I think it was Antonio. Antonio, okay. You say, I think what you do with these live streams is truly unique. Thank you, Antonio. In particular, analyzing followers' videos. How did you get the idea in the first place? Really, it just came from being a part of the conservatory masterclass program. So, absolutely, Frederick. Yeah. So, Antonio, yeah, just when you study music, especially if you study at a collegiate level or professional level, there are always opportunities when you're even if you're studying with a teacher, there are always opportunities given to people to get a master class from another teacher. Sometimes, depending on the school, those are like little miniature competitions, and sometimes they're a little more open than that. Where if there are only 4 slots in a 2.5-hour master class that's open to the public in a concert hall, the 4 performers might be chosen from the best performances from the previous week in a area recital or something like that, where all of the students studying that instrument at that school, that might be like 100 students, whoever played the previous week that's working something up for a competition or for a performance or an audition, they get first dibs. And then who comes out on top, hopefully meaning the people who are prepared the most, they get the slot with the extra teacher. That's kind of where this idea stemmed from. And as I thought about putting it together for the channel, I also remembered having something similar when I was very young, but it was not common at all. It's still not common today for anybody who's studying with a teacher to get lessons from another teacher. It's usually not a thing. And there's some teachers really don't like it because they don't want another teacher to disagree with how they're teaching something, which does happen really often. But when I was younger, I was studying with one teacher, and I had once in a while, there was a master teacher from Hungary who had come like to the town next to me, next to where I lived, and who would spend a day or two teaching a lot of local students. And so the teachers that were friends of his would find out he was coming to town and would line up, a couple of each of their students to go play for him. And so that also, I thought of that while I was putting together these streams and thought, well, this really could be stuff at any level. It doesn't have to be, a really professional master class. But really, anybody studying anything at any level could benefit from this type of forum and this type of setting. The one thing I wish we could do that's just impossible is I wish whoever sends in a recording, I wish that student could be live on the call so that we could demonstrate back and forth, so that I could give advice and it could be tried out in real time. And that's the one thing that's missing that happens in in-person master classes. Very little in a master class, actually, even in teaching high-level music, very little demonstration by the teacher is done. It's kind of done as a last resort. If the student can't unlock it on their own via other types of direction. And that's one thing that I wish we could do differently here. I wish there was that kind of response between all of you watching and what I'm saying, especially who sends in the recording, or if you could play live, that would be great too. But I'm not sure. I don't know if that's even possible to have that happen, or what technology I'd need. I don't have, a Yamaha disc clavier system where I can have the piano play. Maybe some of you have heard about this, but Yamaha has a whole program where 2 pianos can be synced across the world, and via MIDI data, a piano in one room can play what the pianist in a whole nother city is playing live, and you can have a video stream sent and synced with it. And then it is really like hearing whoever the student is or whoever's playing is actually playing, and they're playing live, but it's sounding the instrument where the teacher is. That's really cool. But that would also require not only me having that, but the other side, the other students having that too. So, hello, Hyper Joe. Okay, I'm Hyper Joe. I'm going to come back to your question. Antonio, I try not to thrash your playing. I just try to be helpful. Let's see, going back to some of the anxiety around performance stuff, Nathaniel had said, you don't feel that nervous anymore around your teacher, but you kind of accept that it's like 20% worse than playing at home. There might be, Nathaniel, there might be some inner anxiety that still causes that. Even if you're not feeling like, increased blood pressure or heart rate or that kind of stuff, there can be a little bit underneath that still causes those problems to happen. Because almost always, if there's a change from how you practiced it at home, there's an outside influence that's causing that. And if you're going to your teacher, it could just be the fact that it's a different setting, but it could also be intertwined with feeling anxious about it at some baseline low level. And Dith, don't think that way. Dith said you have to do the Chopin A minor waltz. That one. For a recital, you say, the nerves are going to get to you on the quintuplet beat. That's that E major. And there. Dith, don't even think that way. Change that to be, I'm going to rock that phrase. I'm going to play it perfectly. Start thinking that way today. And then when you go down to practice, while you're approaching it, don't go down that hole where we say, as we're starting that E major, I can't remember how the B section begins offhand. But as you're starting that change between E and A, that leads to when you're 1 or 2 bars before that arpeggio, think, I'm going to nail it. It's going to be perfect. I'm going to get it right. Everything I practiced is going to be there. And remind yourself before you play the spot that it's going to be there. Now, what actually happens doesn't matter. And that is really important. It doesn't matter. After we've played it, we can learn from it and say, okay, how can I better prepare for next time? But never change the fact that before we play a hard phrase, always think positively about it. Guaranteed, if you think, oh no, it's coming, we tense up, we get tight. That physically changes how we play, which is going to change how we practiced, which sets us up to go down this whole path of not playing the phrase nearly as well as we can. And as we practiced it at home, we want to do the opposite. Oh, gosh. Okay. Great. Second question, Fred. I see lots of stories. I'm happy people are sharing those. Sometimes it's hard to share stories about when things haven't gone well, but we can learn a lot from that. Oh, what Bethany said is really great here. So she said, everyone's nerves present differently too. It helps to know how your body will react by practicing with the anxiety in front of family, etc. Everyone is different. Yeah. Yes. It's ironic, but some people, when they get nervous, they slow down. Some people, a lot more people, speed up. Some people, for example, if they're nervous in a social situation, they laugh. Other people, when they're nervous, they get very serious. So that's just to expand on exactly what Bethany said. Learn. The only way we can learn those things is by putting yourself in that difficult situation and performing, and then going back and saying, what happened and how can I better prepare for next time? Hyper Joe, I think you're the next official question here. You say, not piano related. Yeah, it might be though. But how to practice triplets. So you say you're trying to learn a portrait of Tracy by Pastorius. There are quarter note triplets after eighth notes. Hyper Joe, being able to transition between rhythms like that, more difficult rhythms, well, you know what? They're not more difficult rhythms. They're just rhythms we haven't experienced as often. If you have no problem playing, we'll stick with A minor for a second. If you have no problem playing, let's say here's a quarter note beat, and you can play eighth notes to quarter notes and eighth notes. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. If you can go between eighth notes and quarter notes, you can play eighth notes to quarter note triplets. We just need to learn a different relationship between those rhythms. But it's no more difficult than when you originally learned how fast are quarter notes, how fast are eighth notes. They're really quite similar. Okay. Think about the pulse or the sense of pulse that we need to put both of those rhythms into. Quarter note triplets, we have to feel over a half note, over 2 beats. So if this is our half note, we have a quarter note triplet like that. 1, 2, 3. This is our quarter note. Right. Okay, now, keeping the idea that we're feeling pulse on a larger scale, not the quarter note pulse that we usually think about when we're playing eighth notes, but a half note pulse. How many eighths go into a half note? 4, of course, right? So if we're feeling half, I'm just playing around in A minor. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm counting all 4 eighths. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. That could be a great exercise. Take the measure that's in your piece and specifically that spot where it transitions from one rhythm to the next. Rhodesy, I don't know what I was playing, if it was the Godfather theme. I guess maybe it was close. Go between those two rhythms using the larger rhythm as your foundational pulse, because it's going to be a lot more difficult to feel a quarter note triplet against a quarter note beat. So start by feeling the beat that encompasses both rhythms. Quarter note triplet fits perfectly into a half note, and eighth notes, thankfully, also fit perfectly into a half note. So we have a larger overarching rhythm. So we just want to change how we count pulse and then practice. You can practice that spot a couple times in a row, going over it to try to get that sense of feel. Another thing is if your ears don't know already what it sounds like. For example, if you haven't heard the piece, go listen to it, of course. If you have heard the piece and maybe there's a lot of inflection or there's rubato that influences how we perceive the rhythm, but we truly want to learn the foundational rhythm and we want to learn how it's built, grab a notation program, MuseScore. Like Rhodesy, is MuseScore still free to write your own music? I ask Rhodesy because I know you use MuseScore. Bethany, I think, do you use MuseScore also? Do you have to have a paid account to use it, or can you use it for free? Drop that in the chat. Because if it's free, go use MuseScore and type in the rhythm that you need to work on that we need to work going between, right? Bethany says, yeah, free. It's free. Rhodesy also said MuseScore is free. Great. So notate it out in a piece of computer software. You could use MuseScore. There are a couple, apps that you could also use. don't ask me for a suggestion on that. I'm not familiar with free apps. If Bethany and Rotzi or Frederick, if you know any free notation apps that you can recommend, drop those in the chat also. Some of the ones for tablet are a little cumbersome, but it's always right there with us, right? Okay, I say this because type in that rhythm in a software that's going to play it back, computer play it back, because you are going to get a perfect representation of how those rhythms work together. And then can you practice clapping along or tapping along first, not even playing? Can we just tap the rhythm? And then can we adjust the volume of the computer playback? So this is something, acoustic principle called masking. If I put a metronome on and I turn it up, you can still hear it on the stream, pretty sure, right? If I clap, if I snap along with it, you're going to hear both. If I turn the volume down, though, significantly, I can still hear this, but if I snap, and if I get the snaps correct, my performance or my execution masks the sound from the device. If I don't get it correct, it does not mask the sound from the device. You hear this at a very soft volume. Nathaniel says there are also YouTube videos to just tap rhythm along with. Great, yeah. And Bethany, handwriting is free. Fred, oh, I see Frederick said that first. Handwriting is free. The problem, Frederick, is that it can't play back for you. Yeah. But it's great. Love it. I haven't handwritten a score in a really long time. So let's see. This was for Hyper Joe. Yeah. So take that computer-generated playback and then also clap or tap the rhythm along with it so you can feel it that way too, because that's going to be a perfect representation. If you mask the rhythm, you have very accurately learned how to go through that passage. Can we take it back? Can we now execute it with fingers and arm movement at the piano, or it's a little more complicated? Yeah. I think that was a great question. I hope that's helpful, not just to you, Hyper Joe, but to everybody here. Let's see. Whitney, you have a great question. So Whitney's question, and then we're going to get to Frederick's second question. Whitney's question, what would you prioritize for practicing if you had very little practice time? You recently got a puppy. Fun. And you barely have time to sit at the piano, I'm sure. Puppies need a lot of maintenance. But congratulations. What is the name of your puppy, Whitney? Yeah, you say she's stolen all of your free time. Okay. Whitney, if you really don't know, oh, June is just agreeing. MuseScore is great for troubleshooting tough spots. Thanks, June. So Whitney, if you really don't know quite how much time you're going to have, that's a little tough. Let's just use a hypothetical that you've got 10 minutes at a time to sit and practice something. Or that's maybe all you can count on, something like that. That's a very, very short amount of time. Pick one thing to work on and pick a very detailed thing to work on. If you've got 10 minutes, and especially, do you know that you're going to have 10 minutes again later in the day and maybe another 10 minutes after that? Are we still going to be able to get through an hour of practicing? It just might be broken up into 6 blocks instead of 1 to 2 blocks. You say, that sounds about right. 10 minutes. Okay. If you've got 10 minutes, take first thing in the day, take one of your technical things that you're working on, an etude or scales arpeggios. Practice 1 or 2 keys if you're working on scales arpeggios. 1 or 2 keys in 10 minutes. We want to do really detailed thoughtful work on one thing. If you have an etude and it's a piece, depending on the level of that etude, pick a small amount to work on. If, for example, if it was a Chopin etude and you had 10 minutes to make progress, we'd be choosing like 1, 2, or 2 measures. Even for a very advanced pianist, 1 to 2 measures. Because we want to have a short enough amount of music that we can do many repetitions. We can be thoughtful about how we use each repetition. What exactly are we working on? Are we working on phrase? Are we working on a technical execution of something? Are we working on building speed? Are we working on more accurately executing a piano dynamic, for example? What is it? And you don't have to pick one thing for those 10 minutes, depending on the challenge of it, but not really more than maybe 2. So very limited scope of what you want to work on. And keep it there. Don't let yourself go to the next 4 bars or 8 bars. Stick with those couple. We can do really great work. In fact, even if you have a lot of time to practice, that method of practice is far more beneficial than sitting and just pounding at something over and over and over and over again, trying to make it better. If you've got 30 minutes or an hour, that's going to be a lot of time wasted. So even people that have a lot of time in one sitting, we can learn from that too. Take a small amount of material, break your practice up into small chunks of time. Even if you've got an hour to sit and do it, put a timer on, have it go off in 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Last time we were on the stream, we talked about Pomodoro technique. The crux of Pomodoro technique is accomplishing what you can in 20 minutes. We think of, if we think of like a whole day, we say, oh, we've got so many hours today. Or if we think about our practice time for a day and you have the luxury of having a lot of practice time, oh, I've got 1 hour or 2 hours or 4 hours of practice today. That can fly by. But if you think instead, I've got 10 minutes. I have a lot of groups of 10 minutes today that I can use. How am I going to use each one? That's going to be so much more productive than sitting down for an hour and saying, I'm going to play. I kind of know what needs to be worked on, and I'm going to play through things, and then an hour is up, and maybe we made progress, maybe we didn't. Okay. Whitney, yeah. So we talked about technique, and then a little bit about repertoire as if it was an etude, but you can apply that to your subsequent 10 minutes throughout the day. Pick a phrase. Our difficult phrases in repertoire, those are always going to be the ones that need more time. So pick a phrase to work on for 10 minutes. One story that I've told here on the channel before is from Liszt's Petrarch Sonnet 104. That phrase, even if I'm not working on the piece or I'm not preparing it to be played, I haven't played that passage, that bar in, 6 months. That spot, I would take 10 minutes and work on that spot. Working on finger articulation, working on how I feel the arm move, working on groupings. I've played that passage regularly, like once a month or once every 2 months, maybe once every 6 months since I was 17. When I first learned it, I was playing it a lot more often than that. But since my first performance of that piece when I was 17, I go back to that passage, and it's just like an all the time thing. It's such a great right-hand study for arpeggiation, and especially the turnaround at the top being a really awkward kind of crossing of, not even crossing, but bringing 1 and 5 really close together at speed. It's just so great. I use it as kind of a miniature etude just in itself. But point being, 1 bar, 10 minutes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Whitney. Split it up into small chunks, just like you said. June, you say, what about when you're first learning a piece? Do you need do you need more time, or do you parse it out? We got to do whatever we can with the time we have. So if you still only have chunks of 10 minutes, we have to learn how to make that really useful. If you have more time and you're beginning to learn a piece, there is still a lot of validity. And this even goes back to how we started today's conversation, talking with Nathaniel about some Bach. If you're only working on, for example, memorizing 2 measures, let's say, spend 10 minutes. And if that's what we can accomplish in 10 minutes, that's great. And we've achieved something really wonderful, especially if it's memorized. Can we come back? Now, let's say we have an hour, right? Okay, we spent 10 minutes working on 2 bars. Move to another piece that you're working on for the next 10 minutes. The third 10 minutes, come back to those bars that you memorized now 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. Come back to those. One playthrough. Do you still have it memorized? Hopefully that answer is yes. Maybe reinforce it with one more playthrough and then move on to the next 2 bars. You can take however many bars is useful for you. It doesn't have to be 2 if you're more advanced or you're able to accomplish more in that 10-minute sitting. I think you're understanding how I'm building this out. The overarching principle is called interleaved practice. So even if we have an hour, we can divide it into 6 chunks or more than 6 chunks. In my own practice, I jump around all the time. I don't have a lot of time to practice. I was just telling someone, a friend of mine that's also a online creator, education creator. Like we have an hour, maybe if we're lucky, we have an hour a day to practice, and we have to use that hour to keep our chops good and professional. That's hard to do. So practice efficiency has to be the best it can possibly be. And a lot of that is built from this concept called interleaved practice, where the mind likes to work on things in short bursts. So fill it with what we can fit in a short burst, move to something else, come back and test the short burst. If it didn't work, do it again. But we're doing it again a little differently and a slightly different time. And if it did work, move on to something new. Yeah. Nathaniel says, you understand what you're saying, but applying that requires discipline, or at least building that habit. 100%. For me, practice time is almost never running through repertoire. Unless I have something I'm preparing to record or to perform, if I have a concert coming up, or like a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago now, I was flying to Boston. I needed to record 21 excerpts of music in basically a day. And I did that with an hour of practice a day, prepping, leading up to it. Until a couple, like 2 days before I went, there was none of that time was spent running through everything. Right? I know how it's going to feel to play a whole piece. I already have that experience because I've done a lot of it. If you haven't, that's going to be an important part to add. We have to know what it's going to feel like to play something beginning to end. Do we need to build more stamina? Do we need to approach something differently? Are there passages that when we link everything together, one causes another one to break? It's a very complicated thing, how to practice. But going back to the crux of what we were talking about, interleaved practice or short bursts of learning is really, really valuable. If it doesn't work for you, the problem is probably not that interleaved practice doesn't work for your mind. It's probably that the 10 minutes we spent weren't quite spent the right way. So instead of dropping it, if it doesn't work for you right away, instead of just saying, I don't think that works, I need to go back to my old ways, try to approach those 10 minutes in a different way than you have. It's impossible for me to tell any of you how to use those 10 minutes best, because I would need to see each of you practice. And I need to see each of you what is working well and what's not working well. And what do you tend to go and repeat and what doesn't get any attention? Yeah. That's great discussion. Hyper Joe, I'm going to answer that question really quickly. And then I have to jump back to, I think, Frederick's next question. Hyper Joe, you say, what would you recommend for a beginner to learn from? Well-tempered clavier or Bach in general? There are things that are much easier. Well-tempered clavier is not at all for a beginner. The preludes and fugues are level 10 RCM, which is approximately 10 to 11, 12 years of study for most people before you're expected to be able to accomplish that. If you think of every RCM level, for example, as being 1 year of study, you might go faster than that. So there are many things. Prior to the well-tempered clavier are the sinfonias. I was just sight reading a couple of those before we had the session this morning. Prior to that are the two-part inventions. There's other Bach repertoire prior to that I am not super familiar with, but there's plenty. And if you go into, for example, you can download syllabus from all of these exam boards like RCM, like ABRSM, and you can look at the repertoire that they will allow for each of the different levels. There are many more simple things from Bach. There are some more simple things from Scarlatti if you want finger movement exercises that are very musical. Nathaniel, the little preludes that we worked on with Nathaniel earlier. Yeah. Nathaniel, do you happen to know what level those are? If I were to guess, I'd say like RCM 4 or 5-ish. Depending on the tempo you accomplish. ABRSM 3 through 6. Oh, that's about equivalent to what I said. Okay. Dith says 5 and 6. Great. Oh, nice, Dith. How did it go? Yeah, a lot of these. There are also like the Clementi sonatinas, which I'm very familiar with. They span like grades 2 through 6. And we tend to think of them all together as like beginner repertoire, but they're really not. Okay, going back to Frederick's question. Second question, you say, very different topic. What are your go-to left-hand exercises for scales and velocity? It's your big technical weakness, which probably stems from too much Chopin, not enough Bach. Okay, Fred, I don't actually think Bach is wonderful. I'm not putting it down. I don't think Bach is going to build velocity in the left hand. It's going to build really fine dexterity of movement and a lot of unique ways of using the fingers that they will make playing the romantic repertoire easier. Sure. Everything subsequent will be easier if you study Bach. But I don't really think that they're going to help speed your technique up, because Bach almost never works on speed for the sake of speed. Dith, you say you thought your performance went fine. Let's focus on the positives, Dith. So what do I use? Frederick. It's going to be a moment of brutal honesty because I haven't actually worked on this in some time. Usually for left hand, if I really want to build speed, work on stuff, I will look for passages in repertoire that I have always struggled to play with the left hand. And I'm going to show one on the screen, but I do not think I'm going to even attempt. I I haven't played this in 16 years. Okay, we'll have a little game. We'll make a little game out of it. Who can name the piece and movement just by looking at this little snippet? Rhodesy says it looks like a Beethoven sonata. What gave that away, Rhodesy? I'm pulling out a piece of advanced repertoire because I know Frederick is a very fine pianist. Ah, Frederick, perfect. Nailed it. Third movement of the Les Adieux Sonata. Ay, ay, ay. Yep, that's what happens when you don't touch something for 16 years. Oh, there we go. The bottom of the page begins the left hand's imitation of what the right hand just played. Going on to the next page, continues on. That, and then as that continues to come around again and again in the movement, that was always a really difficult part to execute. When I'm well practiced, the right hand through there was no problem. And the left hand always took a considerable amount of work. That's a spot, Frederick, that I would look at for left hand articulation. And then, of course, you could, if you really want to turn it into an exercise, you could take these passages, like those 4 bars. Even what happens next on the left hand is nowhere near as difficult as the scalar passage. If you don't know the tempo this is supposed to be, let me try to play the top of what you're seeing right now with the right hand at tempo. It would be. It's brutal. Okay, so that was very wrong. You got the gist of what it is. The quarter note is and then the left hand has to do it. Okay, I'm not going to try to do the left hand. So I'd use that, Frederick, and I would transpose it. If you want to make an exercise out of it, transpose it to a couple other keys and work on that. It's so hard to play really well. Frederick, I also know, because we've talked before, that you were working on the Liszt Sonata at some point. That may have been a year ago. It might be like an in progress kind of thing. Antonio said, I made a video about this. Was it with Pellini? And the video with Pellini I made, Antonio, was about a Chopin nocturne. I don't think I referenced Pellini playing. Maybe I did. I can't remember. I know I talked about this sonata. The first movement of it has a 2-bar phrase that I think is even more challenging than these scales passages. So, Frederick, if you're working on the Liszt Sonata, or you have some of that still in your fingers, work on some of the arpeggiated and scalar runs across the sonata. You don't have to work on a lot of them. That's stuff that I would look at for building dexterity and speed. I wouldn't personally go to any Czerny, especially because we're still going to have to learn how to apply what we learned, let's say, from Czerny to a piece of repertoire where it might feel a little bit different. And so if there are pieces that you want to accomplish and you want to be able to play those phrases, jump right in, because I know you have the ability to do it and you have the training to just jump into this kind of stuff. Rhodesy, yes, Liszt only wrote 1 sonata. Oh, Frederick. Yeah, Frederick says you jump to the D minor slow theme and ignore the octaves and the runs. I get that. It was like when I was learning Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto. Is it on here? Oh, there it is. I would skip all of the fast stuff over the first 10. Yeah, the first 10 pages, and I jump right to because I just love that writing. But that's fun, but it didn't help me play the first 10 pages. Yeah, I hear you, Frederick. Oh, Rhodesy, that's a great comment. If you're not crazy, go Cherny, and if you're mad, go Hannon. Uh, Still, I'll go back and say, Frederick, I really think picking out difficult left-hand passages in repertoire, do that, because you don't need to work on scales. You know those all already. You don't need to work on arpeggios, etc. We need a real practical example of something that we're going to see in repertoire to take it to the next level. And then subsequent to that, Frederick, use groupings. Groupings are your friend. Beat groupings, if you do like a dotted eighth 16th note, if they're all 16th notes, rhythmic groupings like that. And something I was just teaching the other day, follow the 90-10 rule. So if your goal is to play a passage at 150 beats per minute, challenge yourself. So if that's our 100% goal is 150 beats per minute, challenge yourself to go 10% beyond that. So 165. Be able to play it at 165, and likely you will rise to the occasion of successfully and repeatedly playing it at 150. But if we only set our goal of being maximum tempo is here, and we don't challenge ourselves beyond, it's unlikely that we'll actually ever attain the speed that we truly have as a goal. Yes. Yeah, Frederick, you said speed while keeping relaxed is the main thing. Rhythmic groupings, for sure, because those give us opportunities every beat to build in that relaxation that we eventually want to be a part of the entire passage. And at that point, it's repetition. Oh, okay. I have to go back through our comments. Oh, Seth, thank you. Just a compliment on my sweater. Thank you, Seth. Okay, Seth, you also asked a question. Invention number 8 and some rotation in bars 18, 19. Eight. My score that I have on here does not have measure numbers, so let me count those quickly. 18, 19. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19. Let's double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19. Okay. Let's see, left hand. Oh. So probably. Four, five rotation. You must be talking in particular about at the beginning of measure 19. I'm tending in my score. By the way, this is the inventions as edited by Busoni, which I love using. I really love the articulations that Busoni marked, the slurs, the staccato. Occasionally there'll be some dynamic markings. I think they're really good and they're not overly romanticized. I think they're really well done. So if you're a clean text Bach student, adding the Busoni edition of the inventions might be a nice addition to your library. Okay, Seth. So are we talking about maybe just the beginning of that bar? Because I'm not seeing any 4/5 rotation. Even if we use the... Oh, I would never use the lower fingering on this score. So, oh, Seth, I think you said yes to that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's just not use that. Seth, if you've got 5/4/3 there, I would really use the one that's written above, not the fingering that's below. That might be a first helpful thing. So the thumb plays here in the left hand, the first beat, and then it's going to jump because we're playing, even at a very fast tempo, we're playing staccato. We can release, and we only have a step to transition down with the thumb. So. And then that turns this into a nice little rocking motion where the fourth finger isn't coming over the 5, which is horribly inefficient. Yeah. Now, as far as rotating through here, we can build a little exercise out of this, Seth. So first, can we just play a trill, a slow trill between 4 and 5? And can we... Let's do it in three distinct ways. 1, fingers only. 2, rotation only, which is going to feel sloppy, but it's going to get your hand moving a lot. So I'm trying really hard to not articulate with the fingertips or with our bridge, from our bridge, just using rotation to play those. So we feel how big the rotation can be, back and forth, then incorporating the 2. If you need to refresh how to have active fingers, play a little bit just fingers, and then a little bit of rotation, and then a little bit of both combined. If you can play this using both combined, if you can play forte across that trill, that'll be great. Now, the good news is, in the context of the piece, it's only one time through. Using the principle that we kind of just talked about, if you can play through here and you can extend the technique that we need across a beat or 2 beats or 3 beats, and that's very comfortable, when it comes time to play this, and we only have to execute it once, it's going to be a piece of cake. So this is also, you could think about this as a part of Mozart's trill exercise. Thanks, OCD King. Thank you so much. So, if you're familiar with Mozart's trill exercise, it's quoted in the Hanon book. So most of you probably have a copy of the Hanon exercises, and you can find the notation for that in there. But it's basically trilling with almost every finger combination you could possibly trill with, working our way from the thumb side of the hand all the way out to the 4/5 side of the hand and continuing to trill. And doing it all without pausing or breaking, or hopefully making, for example, 1 and 3 sound just as even as 4 and 5. So Seth, if you could also practice that with the left hand, especially focusing on the fingerings like 3/4, 3/5, 4/5. Right. So if I show you that again, starting these same pitches that we're using in the piece, 3/4, we're doing some repetition. Notice there's still rotation happening. Transitioning to 3/5, skipping 4. So 4 is not in use. Then transitioning to 4/5, and go back, 5 and 3, 4 and 3. That's going to help build you toward that outside of the hand, the 4/5 side of the hand. Yeah, Dith, would not be a stream without Hanon catching strays. Never. And hopefully, let me put this back on screen one more time. And Dith, if you don't have, I don't know what score you're using, if it has fingering suggestions or not, but take a screenshot of this or come back to the video. It's 1 hour and 45 minutes. Christopher, I didn't even know you were here, but thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. So Dith, screenshot this, and really I would use the top set of fingerings, not the bottom. So thumb, skip. Then the rotations at the end of the bar, and those are a lot easier than that transition, 4/5, 4/1, because then those rotations are just much larger, and we can feel it from the thumb side of the hand more to the outside of the hand. Does that help, Seth? You said sounds good. So I'm going to say, I think we're good. Let's see. If I skipped any questions, please let me know. Nathaniel, you said, does it take multiple years to learn speed? Or is it purely about proper technique? It's both. Proper technique. Proper technique is really hard to teach and learn early in learning the piano. I say that because we have to build a foundation from somewhere. But then how we use the hand and the arm to play more virtuosically requires thinking a little differently. At least that's the way I perceive it. Things are much less about individual notes and pitches, and they're more about big gestures when we want to build a lot of speed. The problem is that in thinking about bigger gestures, that's one of the reasons why I love the Hanon Faber book, not Hanon, but Hanon Faber, because it teaches gesture at a very early level. And that's really important to start thinking in terms of that. The trouble with trying to teach bigger gestures over long phrases early is that we haven't developed enough finger dexterity in itself to really allow the bigger gestures to take shape and to be what they need to be. And even in practice, I think a lot of performing pianists would also tell you that both in learning a new piece of music at a concert level and also keeping it there, keeping old repertoire there, requires going back and drilling certain things that might seem very beginner, like firm strikes with fingers in certain places, how we use the wrist, over exaggerating some movements, playing things slowly. And then again, we work bigger gestures into that to allow the performance to take shape at the tempo it needs to be. But even after you've accomplished all of that technique, unless you're, Martha Argerich, most of us have to revisit more basic ways of practicing on a daily basis. Catherine, thank you for your question. That was all the way back at the beginning, and I'm sorry I missed it. Let me scroll back, Catherine, and let's talk about that question. And we'll probably make that question the last one for today. Unless somebody's already dropped one and I missed it, I will try to answer. Okay. Okay, so Catherine, going back to your question, you say you've been at an intermediate level for a few years, which is fine, you say, but it's becoming difficult to know which pieces to choose. And to give you an idea, you've recently learned Chopin Prelude in B minor. You mentioned a couple others that I'm not familiar with. Hello, Backwards Fellow. Catherine, I'm pulling up the B minor prelude we're talking about is, I'm assuming, the famous left-hand one. Just mention, Catherine, if that's the one. Yeah. Okay. And thanks for the notes about those other composers. I should check them out. So let me tell you, Catherine, what I'm doing, because this is exactly the same process you could go through. I always have a handy copy of the RCM syllabus. I always have one on my iPad. I don't think it's been updated since 2022. If somebody knows, if it has, I will download a new copy. Does anybody here know? Is it still the same syllabus from 2022, or has it changed at all? For example, Nathaniel, maybe you're doing RCM exams, Dith. Dith, you say it hasn't been. Do you know when it was updated, Dith? I bring that up because I go through the large list, and I like using the RCM syllabus because of the extra levels that it's broken out into. Whereas some others might be only like 6 levels or 8 levels. RCM is 10 with 2 preparatory levels at the beginning. Oh, 2022 Dith, that's the one I'm using. Great. Okay. Plus there are diploma levels after level 10. So there's a really, really wide range of, and it's, I think, especially great for finding mid, intermediate, and early advanced repertoire, because it's broken down. That sort of repertoire is broken down into many different levels. Whereas if you look at like the Henley leveling system, all mid intermediate repertoire is like level 4. And there are some very different challenges in their set of level 4 pieces. So, Catherine, RCM is also in the UK. So you can use either one. It's free to download the PDF of the entire syllabus. And don't just look at, let me show you, for example, I was going to look for what level that Chopin prelude was. I would have to maybe do a Google for that, but just to show you, this is what I'm looking at. This is level 6, and I'm looking at list C, which shows, for example, a massive number of pieces that we can work on that are romantic. And the famous Chopin that's listed is the Waltz in A minor. And I bring this up because at the beginning of each level, there are always pages like this left-hand page, for example, with a very short list of repertoire, just a handful of pieces. Don't look at that short list. We could exhaust that fairly quickly. Look at these really long lists of examples of repertoire. So now in level 6, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 pages of music. Sorry about my iPad turned off. Let me bring that back on. So, Catherine, I think what you're seeing on my screen here is that there is a massive amount of repertoire out there that we could go through at each individual level. And you can usually type in Google. I'm saying this because this is a process I would go through if I was your teacher, but you can do the same process. And if they are fairly common pieces of music, like the Chopin Prelude, type in what level is it? What are RCM level of Chopin Prelude B minor? I wouldn't think it would be 7. No, those look more difficult. It's probably 5 or 6-ish. Somewhere in there. So it might have been listed. If it's not listed in the current syllabus, it may have been listed in a previous year. It is 6, you say. Wonderful. Okay. So go through this list, a list of level 6 or level 5, and pick out some new repertoire. Or, for example, there are some little nuggets that I think are really great in here. Okay, this is back. For example, now we're looking at level 5. The music by William Gillick is really, really great stuff. And these books like Accent on Gillick and the Lyric Preludes, the Lyric Preludes are really, really lovely pieces, all of them. If you haven't done any Gillick Preludes, do the whole book. I want to say there are 24, one in each key. And they are all approximately mid-intermediate level. Those are really, really great. Just Dith also said the Lyric Preludes rule. Yeah. Okay. So, for example, that's something I would recommend doing. But go through the whole list, and when you see composer names that if it's a classical composer, it's going to be in the public domain, and it's going to be available usually for free, imslp.org. You don't have to purchase a score unless you really want a paper score. For a lot of the Gillick scores are sold. They're on Amazon, but the edition is by the composer himself. Get that one. If there's multiple editions, get the one that's by the composer, because the pedal markings are really important and they're from him personally. But there are other composers on here like Kabalevsky. There is the entire opus opus 27 and opus 39. Those would be great pieces to look at. If you've done a couple, wonderful. Now expand and do more from that set. There's the Schumann album for the young. Do more of that. That's a huge set of music. If you've only done a couple of those pieces, skip over some of the early stuff because that's going to be maybe too easy for you. But go 10 pages in, 10 pieces in, and in general, the Schumann book is according to difficulty, and as the book progresses, the difficulty becomes greater. Thanks so much, Whitney. Thanks for being here. Nathaniel, yeah, a second recommendation from Nathaniel for the Kovalevsky set. I like to teach from that because it's the harmonies within that are interesting. They're more interesting. They're less kind of your standard, what you're used to seeing or hearing that you get with Schumann. There was also, let's see here. The Tchaikovsky album for the young. So if you haven't done that, that's another resource to look at. Here's a little bit of that. The very first one. Just a really lovely piece, right? And these, they're very interesting in that there's a lot of hearkening back to the Schumann set. So that's another set of music you could look at, the Tchaikovsky album for the young, and that's Opus 39. Those should pop up as recommendations in the RCM syllabus, for example, at the levels you look at. There should be one or two selections from those sets that pop up. But really, they only choose one or two and they don't show the whole set, not always because the other pieces are more difficult or less difficult. They do vary. But usually there's going to be one recommendation to help focus in on one thing. But everything in this album for the young is going to be mid, intermediate to early advanced. Same thing for the Schumann set. Okay, Catherine, I hope that helps. Also, someone who shares your first name, Catherine Rollin, writes a lot of really lovely mid-intermediate work. And it's contemporary. And you could look at her works as well. And she's always publishing new stuff. So if you wanted a different contemporary composer to take a look at, my students usually really, really like her repertoire. Yeah. Okay. I think we made it through all the questions. Did I miss anybody? Please let me know. I will throw an answer in right now. I have missed the entire discussion about, I think, Frederick, Bethany, you've been talking about composing. Awesome. I missed that whole discussion. So I hope you've had a good time. You're welcome, Catherine. My pleasure. Okay. I think we're going to call it a day. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I was just thinking if there's anything else I wanted to mention, but I think we're good. Just as a reminder, and this is listed in the description of the video down below, Nathaniel. Oh, Nathaniel say Rhodesy had a question? I missed it. And I think Rhodesy logged off. So I'm sorry, Rhodesy, if you come back and listen to the end. But Rhodesy, you know we talk about your stuff. So I'm sure that we'll hear from you. Oh, I remember that. He wanted to know how to profit on piano music. That's yeah, we'll save that for when he's back. Okay, thanks everybody for being here. And so I was saying down below in the description is the date that we're going to have the next stream. It's in January because 2 weeks from today, if you're new here, by the way, we always do these on the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And 2 weeks from today is Christmas Day. I will not be having a live stream. I know you're all bummed out about that, right? But there won't be a stream that day. And I hope if you celebrate Christmas, you have an enjoyable holiday. And if you don't, I still hope you have a good winter. And if you celebrate a different holiday, have a great rest of the month of December and early January, whatever that holiday happens to be for you. So I will see you, whatever date is listed below. I'll see you. It's about 4 weeks, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. Come back, check in. Remember, if you haven't been here, there's a way to submit videos of your playing down below in the description. And we show those videos live on the stream, and then we talk about them, usually for somewhere between 30 and 50 minutes per person that sends in. They're always first come, first serve. I usually only have 2 spots per stream. So if you want to send something in, send it to me earlier rather than later. There's a chance the first spot for the next stream will be taken by Miguel, who has contacted me about playing Chopin's first Ballade, which will be a lot of fun to hear him play and work on that. All right. Have a great time, everybody. Stay tuned on the channel for a couple more videos, a slew of videos coming out. Thanks so much, Frederick, for being here. Frederick, if you don't know about Frederick's channel, click on his name. If you can click on it in the chat or tap on it, go to his page and check out his videos. Just great stuff. Very interesting discussion. And Frederick is a great composer, and his music is going to be featured on this channel very shortly. Okay, everybody, have a great rest of December. Have a great rest of today. Practice smarter, not harder. I'll see you in January. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. See you later.